It is my house has been replaced with a house-looking oven. It is horrible here. I hate it. It is horrible, horrible, horrible. But the thing that is not horrible is my co-host, the man, the myth, the genuine body counter, the authentic body counter, Mr. Travis Croft. How are you, sir?
I am fine and dandy. I would not take any credit about being a member of Body Count because Ice T will hunt me down and he will kill me. Do not mess with Ice.
Dude, we need the publicity.
Yeah, not at my expense. No, I've seen Body Count in concert. You don't mess with Ice T.
It's you are the talent. We can't lose the talent.
This is true, but also I'd rather not die at the hands of a drive-by or something. He strikes me the kind of guy you don't want to mess with. You make a fair point. It is, I think, up to 5 or 6 days now here in Melbourne, Australia, with temperatures over 30. Which for those of you using, hogsheads to the gallon and Freedom Eagles per liter. It is 86 in your antiquated and non-functional scale.
It's just stupid. That's what it is.
And that's kind of weird because there's been no over 40 days here, which we are known for occasionally in summer. So again, for Freedom Eagles per meter, that's 104 over temperatures over 100, not uncommon. We haven't had one of those. They've all been in that realm of 30 to 35. And, that's kind of nuts if you live somewhere unfortunate enough not to have air conditioning. There's a reason I insist on it wherever I live. I am too old to actually fuck around with just a fan these days,
Yeah.
It's a must.
Not cut it. It does not. But
it's better than nothing. But climate change is coming for us all. So I am going to, if I have to sleep in the living room under the air conditioner, I will. So noticeably, a neighbor on about level 4 of my apartment building was complaining on the building's Facebook group that my apartment's air conditioner was dripping water on her balcony, which was quite a feat, I thought, considering. Have you ever stood? I mean, can you imagine standing on level 4? So her balcony sticks out a little bit further than all the other ones above it. So she's got a bigger one, and standing on that balcony on level 4 and looking up at something dripping above and going, ha, that's level 15 and apartment 15, blah, 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 blah. And, you can magically tell what apartment that water is dripping from because, it's such an easy thing to see.
Little do you know that the person in apartment, on level 4, is actually Sheila Holmes.
I'm sure she's eliminated all logical possibilities, and illogical, however improbable, is invariably true. But the other thing she's also somehow managed to mentally work her way through is there are, between me and her, 11 levels or so. Funny enough, what they have on those 11 levels is something I like to call apartments. And they all have air conditioners of the same make and model, generally speaking, as I do. And you know what? They all produce water. And so all you got to do is, I came back on Monday, having spent the weekend somewhere else. And you look over there, before I even turned the air conditioner on, because it was freaking hot in here, I looked over the balcony, and her balcony was half soaked. And all I could see was balconies below me dripping water on top of it. And I'm like, I don't understand the people in this building, but people in this building are the biggest busybodies I've ever met in my life.
I was half expecting you to say you looked over the balcony, you just saw her looking up at you going, whoa!
Waka, waka, waka! I wouldn't be surprised, but I woke up this morning and I looked on outside, and her balcony was literally drenched with water. It was soaked. And I didn't leave the air conditioner on all night, so it wasn't my evil doing. So
citing the others to do it, though, that's the truth of it.
It is. It's a cunning conspiracy to get back at her for having twice the balcony space that I do. It's they say revenge is a dish best served cold. I say it's best served wet.
Or Dutch ovened in the elevator.
Well, yes, I don't know who this person is though, so fortunately, and I don't really want to announce my presence as being the evil person in this particular apartment who's complained about.
That's true, yeah.
Because my neighbor, Whiny McGee, as I call him, if you speak above a whisper in the living room, he complains that you're blasting his bedroom. So, apartment living, ladies and gentlemen, this is what we signed up for. So, he has no air conditioning. I have shitty neighbors. What has the world come to?
First world problems, ladies and gentlemen.
Exactly. Yes. Compared to the life in the Ukraine right now, I think I would take a hot apartment.
Yeah. I think we're not too bad, but damn it, I'm British and I can complain with the best of them.
Yes. Quite. And you should note also it is Invasion Day in Australia. Thanks to you, personally.
I do take it all on.
Full responsibility for all of the crimes of a British Empire for the last 500 years.
I have apologized for the death of Jesus Christ on more than enough occasions. I do still need to apologize for Invasion Day, for everything that happened in India.
Harry Styles, are going to,
there's a lot. So
Jedward, Simon Cowell.
Don't. If you start me on that, it will just be 2 hours of apology, and that would not even break the surface.
In fairness, I think the death of Christ might be the one thing there with the British Empire just didn't have their finger in that pie. But you never know.
Well, the British Empire was essentially derived from the Roman society, and the Romans are the ones that did it. So, genetically, it's still out.
It's a stretch, but it's there. So we have. I felt like we said last week we had a lighter show, and we didn't.
Yeah.
I feel like again we have a lighter show this week, at least from my perspective.
Agreed.
But we'll see how we go in the long run. Last week we actually went over 2 hours with a lighter show.
But yeah, we've got our chain movie of the week, which I picked. It's Ethan Hawke's first movie, the Joe Dante directed 1985 classic Explorers. We'll talk about more of Peacemaker. And are you up to date on Book of Boba Fett?
No, I haven't watched that for a couple of episodes.
We'll leave Boba for now. You talked about the Australian movie, The Merger, and you've got some more thoughts on Yellow Jacket. And I watched the newest Guy Ritchie movie, Wrath of Man, as well as Hate Myself for some reason, and watched Monster Hunter.
Looking forward to that one.
Yeah.
Very much looking. Should we start with what we should probably do most weeks, but we never do? But start with the chain movie.
Let's start with The Explorers. So I'm going to do this straight away. The Explorers is a boy obsessed with 50s sci-fi movies about aliens has a recurring dream about a blueprint of some kind, which he draws for his inventor friend. With the help of a third kid, they follow it and build themselves a spaceship. Now what?
Ooh. Now, I remember this is a childhood favorite of yours, I believe, yes?
This is one of my brother's particular favorites. I have a soft spot for this one. I do really enjoy it. But it was definitely more my brother's favorite out of the two of us, for sure.
He's a little older than you, right?
Yeah, 4 years.
So, which is about how much older than you I am. So, I'm of your brother's vintage, I suspect. And I agree with your brother. This was actually it was certainly a beloved one that I remember very, very fondly. I feel like I keep talking about this as for younger people who don't understand. Being able to see movies you love wasn't particularly an easy thing in the mid 80s. If your dad didn't dub it like my dad, allegedly, I don't know what the statute of limitations is on copyright, but like allegedly,
Travis will be known as Gloria Wiss.
That allegedly dubbed the tapes onto a blank tape, and you'd have a copy at home because they didn't sell the copies of the movies. You couldn't go out and buy a copy of Explorers if you wanted a copy.
It was
So
that rare moment of sort of like when the Disney movie came to VHS. It was like, oh my god, you got to get it now because they will literally just stop making them because now we can't escape these things. So it was a different
at
time.
one time they were kind of collectible almost.
Yeah.
And I've said it before, it was a big deal when a new Disney animation landed, that kind of thing. So I didn't have this as a copy at home. We had a lot of we had Labyrinth, we had The Neverending Story, but we didn't have Explorers. But I remember seeing it when it came out, or I guess when it came out on VHS, at least here in Australia, and it just kind of blew my mind as a kid of about 8 or 9 at the time. The idea of being able to build your own spaceship with just stuff you had lying around your house with your friends and being able to go into space somehow is an amazing idea. And something that really sparked my young imagination at the time.
Well, that's kind of this movie in a nutshell, really. It is so optimistic. Every element about it is just so delightfully optimistic. Even one of Joe Dante's regulars, where is he? The old man.
The guy from Gremlins, Miller, Eric
yes.
Miller, David Miller.
Yeah, I think it's him. But he's usually the kind of old curmudgeon, and in this there is definitely that. But even he has that moment where he's sort of like talking with one of his friends on the phone. So like, I haven't had dreams like this since I was a kid, and it's like, okay, there's still that little spark of optimism in him. All of them, and honestly, some of the shit that poor Darren, Jason Prieston's family, the little tidbits of what goes on at home, it's like, it doesn't sound like the nicest of upbringings for a kid, but it's still kind of like that optimistic mid-80s hope and joy, and it's a kind of genre of movie that we just don't really get anymore.
I guess you don't get it children's films like this anymore, period. Dick Miller was the actor's name, by the way.
Thank you.
He played Charlie Drake.
Yes.
I found myself sort of reflecting on the period the film was made. So it was released in 85, so I don't exactly know when filming, 84, 85, that time. It was a very particular time in the United States, a time of, we noted, a large degree of optimism. This was the middle of the Reagan years, and despite the fact that that guy was a gold medal A-grade cunt, that like they liked him for some reason. The guy got reelected in 84 in a historical landslide. So there was a great deal of optimism about the world. I mean, I can't remember the Challenger disaster. I feel like it was maybe a couple of years after this, but you notice the vibe about NASA and space being a really optimistic thing for Americans to have. The kids put a NASA sticker on the spaceship. They put a copy of a space shuttle on the front of it.
NASA was so in vogue. Do you remember? Did you ever see a movie called Space Camp?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
If you didn't notice, this kid in Ethan Hawke, I think, has the Space Camp poster on his wall of his bedroom.
Yeah.
Challenger disaster, just if you're like me and you can't remember, was a year after this film came out. So I think that put a bit of a dent into American confidence and American optimism. But I feel like if you, on a surface level at least, if you look at the 1980s through the film and the music that was popular, it was a deeply optimistic time compared to, if we compare it to last week's film, which was as 90s as they get, Reality Bites, which had a bleaker outlook on life as a slightly older young person than these young people, but it certainly painted a less optimistic picture of the world.
Yeah.
And sometimes I stop and think about it and go, well, I wonder what it was about the 80s that did that. I mean, I was there, but I wasn't old enough to really be paying attention to what was happening. But if you think about it, like, the Cold War was still real. There was still, a very real chance of you getting the world being obliterated by nuclear weapons. Whereas if you flash forward 9 years into the future, Reality Bites, the Cold War is obviously over. I mean, the US is the predominant power in the world. The Soviet Union's gone. China hasn't really stepped up yet. So you kind of wonder and go, why was everybody so depressed in the 90s? but they were.
We just don't have anything to fight right now.
Pretty much, you kind of like we need an enemy to point our hatred at, which again is maybe going too deeply sociological about a simple children's film, but you nail it. The sense of hope and optimism and joy of childhood. And I think this is a particular time in childhood films. If you look at other films going around, you're thinking, I mentioned Labyrinth, stuff like Never Ending Story, Gremlins.
Yeah.
Gremlins is kind of a kids' film. Stand By Me,
And yeah, kind of. But there was a genuine rash of them that maybe they're the sweet spot for nostalgia for us, and we look back on them as more influential than they are, perhaps. The same way that Tarantino looks back at the 60s and 70s movies and that sort of thing. But there was just this rash of movies that was incredibly optimistic and just youthful exuberance. And the closest simile that I can think of is like in the mid to late 90s, early 2000s, when we suddenly had that just swarm of teen rom-coms. And it was not Porky's level risque comedy. It was the American Pie era. And things. That was the closest to teenage optimism that we've had in movies since.
I would say, and obviously you and I are not the intended audience for movies, for family movies, as they euphemistically call them anymore. But can you think of a live-action family movie, a successful live-action family movie that has come out in the last 5 to 10 years? I'm quickly scanning my brain. I can't think of many.
Well, Jungle Cruise was successful, and that qualifies as a family movie. It's not excessively violent. It's the same kind of ilk as the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, which
I don't think they're family movies. Jungle Cruise, maybe. I haven't seen it, but other than being awful,
Pirates of the Caribbean 1 definitely are designed as family movies because they skirt that Doctor Who line of there's genuinely creepy creatures in there, but they're given a little bit more heart and emotion and empathy to them so that you don't necessarily feel entirely just terrified of them, like the Wheelers and the witch who can just change your heads in the Return to Oz and that fucking nightmare of a movie. There's this brevity to those movies that I think is the closest that they go before they just go, oh, well, if we're going to make a family movie, let's just make it animated.
I think that's where family movies have migrated now. I mean, maybe the answer is family movies don't look like they did when I was a kid, and that's why I'm not recognizing them as such. The reason I don't think Pirates of the Caribbean is a family movie is because it's 2.5 hours long, and I think that in itself disqualifies it as a family movie. Find me a child who can sit still for 2.5 hours.
Well, that time frame thing of the 90-minute movie is basically a lost art.
I noticed there's a category on Netflix now called itself 90-minute movies, and I'm like, someone's listening to me.
It's just a side note on this movie length thing. The Batman, I'm extremely excited for it, but they're saying it's going to be pushing about the 3-hour mark. If you can warrant the story, then sure, but otherwise, you don't need a fucking 4-hour movie. Stop it, Hollywood. Stop it.
I mean, it's just self-indulgence is what it is. It's self-indulgence. Yeah. Matt Reeves, I wouldn't have actually thought of as a self-indulgent director, but you need to get into your story. 2 hours, 55 minutes is what IMDb says right now. That's kind of crazy. Off topic already. But, I don't think The Dark Knight was that long, and that was certainly, Batman Begins was 2 hours, 20 minutes if we go to the Nolan films.
Yeah.
And that was certainly, an auteur director who had earned his keep with a very successful, reboot of a Batman franchise. The Dark Knight was 2.5 hours, and that had one of the greatest performances in comic book or any cinema, if you listen to me anyway. But we're off topic. But Explorers is 1 hour 49, which is a little bit more palatable. So, I mean, to get into the plot a little bit, we have our main characters, Ben and Wolfgang, played respectively by very young Ethan Hawke and River Phoenix, both, and I think their first major big screen debuts.
Mm-hmm.
And Jason Preston, whose your name actually was Darren, it rounds up the sort of a main trio of characters.
Mm-hmm.
Ethan Hawke is a sci-fi obsessed young kid.
Mm-hmm.
River Phoenix plays the nerd, which is kind of hilarious considering he was like the coolest guy alive for a while there.
Yeah.
And Jason Preston kind of plays the scrappy underdog kid coming from a broken home kind of character, but more of the I guess you'd almost say the pragmatist kid who brings the technical skill or the hands-on skills to the team. That Ethan Hawke starts dreaming about plans for a circuit board, which he scribbles down on a piece of paper and then takes into his nerd friend River Phoenix or Wolfgang, who James Cromwell plays his dad, kind of hilarious. James Cromwell, I don't think ages. Like, I think he's always been that old.
74.
Yeah. He looks the same as he did in First Contact in about 10 years after this.
Yeah.
So he has computers. Ooh.
128K computer, thank you.
Apple can do it. And so he designs the circuit board on his computer and then somehow fucking builds it. I don't know if that was a thing you could do in the 80s, but I know computer hobbyists were a thing, but
that's the other thing that was in the 80s. There was just so much love for the garage physicist. Everyone, you think of Honey, I Shrunk the Kid, you think of this, you think of pretty much any movie, even the Goonies. It had like the gadgets and things like that he would create and all that stuff. And there was just this MacGyver style of, technology is booming. We don't know what we can possibly do. Okay, we'll write a thing where this happens because of technology. And it's just like, sure, okay.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, maybe that was influenced by people like, if we think again about the era of people like Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, who did start Apple in a garage, and by the mid '80s were a household name, and the cult of Jobs had started. So maybe that's where the influence came from. The icons of the technology of the 80s had started their careers in the garage. So they build the circuit board somehow, and they plug it into their computer somehow, and it creates a glowing orb which can float around the room. And by changing the size of it and using their computer, they can actually achieve, using this orb, they can achieve flight. And they decide the best way to use this is they repurpose a carnival ride called a tilt-a-whirl or something, and they build their own little spacecraft with it, which they then put the bubble around it, and they can fly around and actually achieve orbit at one point in time. The spacecraft they call the Thunder Road, which is named after a Bruce Springsteen song, I think it was. And they have like oxygen tanks in there and shit, which to me,
because kids that are the age of about 10 to 12 can easily get hold of an oxygen tank.
Very much so. It's much the way they're able to steal all the equipment to build their spacecraft. That's very, very, very well glossed over by the film. These kids are ripping off a hardworking American blue-collar man who's just trying to make ends meet with his junkyard, and these stinking kids are attacking a patriot. That's what's going on in this film. Stinking liberals and their indoctrination. Starts young, kids, I tell you.
This is the problem with the arts.
This is really the problem with the arts. You should just get rid of it and replace it with all the very, very successful and talented conservative actors like James Woods. It should just be James Woods starring in Michael Bay films. That should be it. There should be no other films. Maybe Kid Rock can score them. Apparently, he likes that kind of thing.
That would be a weird train wreck that I morbidly want to see.
It would be interesting. I'd pay that.
Yeah.
You could maybe get Eastwood involved. He's a Republican. So they achieve flight. Like, you're right. They get all this shit, and I'm like, I don't think that oxygen tank would be enough for a particularly long period of time in flight.
But don't worry, the story solves that with more dreams.
dreams, dream sequences, and the dream sequences look like a Dire Straits video.
Dire Straits meets Tron.
Yes, a very hip, cool computer animation. This is actually the first film Industrial Light and Magic actually co-produced. So since other than the Star Wars films, I think so. ILM did some of it, at least did not all of the special effects for this film. So this is state of the art at the time. And I should note there are a number of Star Wars references peppered throughout the film, if you can pick up on them.
Yeah.
My particular favorite, at one point, the kids while they're testing the spacecraft, take it to the drive-in. And the film showing is a schlocky science fiction film starring Robert Picardo in possibly one of my favorite. He's just he's great, Robert Picardo. He drops up in the weirdest places. He's in 3 roles in this film, by the way, 3 roles, and this is one of them. He plays the protagonist of this bad sci-fi film called Starkiller. And so, if you're a nerd like me, you'll know that originally that Luke Skywalker was going to be Starkiller, not Skywalker, in the original Lucas version of the script. But probably, I mean, it wasn't a Starkiller base. Wasn't that what it was in Force Awakens?
It was, yeah, it was Starkiller base.
So, you know, they didn't actually burn that idea. They just said, we'll park it for 40 years. So that's an idea. And there's another one where a kid puts a helmet on and then he uses a flashlight, a little bit like a lightsaber. There's a Wilhelm scream. So, you know, this film is full of little kid bits like that. The kids go to Charles Jones High School, and that's Chuck Jones, Looney Tunes. And there are a number of Looney Tunes references throughout the film. So
that's a particular staple of any Joe Dante movie. He is a huge fan of Looney Tunes. And every movie that he's in, you can find that sort of stuff.
He actually did end up directing a Looney Tunes film, if I'm not mistaken. Looney Tunes Back in Action.
Which
so I don't think it was very good.
I think we watched it like about a year ago, maybe.
I don't think we've watched that one. I mean, we could watch it if you want, but I have no intention to take
Steve Martin in it.
Yes. Anyway, very sad. We're not going. There's a spoiler alert right now. I have the keys next, and we are not going to Looney Tunes Back in Action. It was moderately tempting because I've never seen it, but no. There is all sorts of stuff about your classic sci-fi stuff, and there's a rat called Heinlein. There's constant references to the 1950s War of the Worlds film. You said that's a very Joe Dante film to do. And so then that's sort of it covers the first 2 acts of the film. We get to the third act where they take a flight, and when they fly high enough into space, their computer in their ship is taken over by, we assume, aliens who transmitted the plans to them in the first place, and they're guided into the alien spaceship where the significantly weakest part of the film takes place. I should also note here that these kids are super chill. Like, they're flying in a really shoddily built metal and plywood carnival ride surrounded by some sort of bubble which they don't really understand, and they're just kicking it, flying past the moon, and they're like sitting there eating a sandwich and, you know, having a snack, and you're like, yeah, this is cool.
Cool.
Yeah, there's also no weightlessness involved, so there's some special tech.
Inside the bubble, there's no inertia.
Right, that's
able to speed up and slow down without kind of going and getting the whole Star Trek.
I was going to say, it must be the anti-inertia derived from Star Trek somehow, the inertia field or whatever it was. But like, it's like this, like, you're fucking flying past the moon, guys. Like, and you say, oh, yeah, it's all right, you know. You're like, I would be shitting myself.
But that's the thing. It's like even when they meet the aliens in the end, it's sort of like not going like, oh my god, it's an alien. I've been wanting to see it. It's like, hey, what's up? You know, don't be afraid. It's all good.
They're pretty chill kids. And maybe it says something about the optimism and, you know, of childhood in a sense. You don't know enough to be scared yet.
Maybe.
Either way, they get to the alien spacecraft and they hunt around the spacecraft to find said aliens where we meet them. And they are whacked. Sorry?
I said they are unimpressive.
I think the character's name's Whack and something else. But Robert Picardo plays one of them, and he also ended up playing. We find out shortly afterwards that they're actually just kids themselves who've taken the spaceship out for a joyride. When their dad Whack is one of them, and Nick is the other.
Yes.
And Robert Picardo both plays Whack and Nick's and his father. In some,
he does the physical stuff, but
he did the voices. Some of the voices were him, some of the voices were somebody else.
Frank Welker did the voices for Whack and Nick's father. So yeah, he was the one at the very end.
These aliens communicate through pop culture references. Basically, as they've learned how to speak English or learned about human society by intercepting Earth's TV signals, and that's how they've learned about us. And their entire conversation is basically references. It's like hanging out with me for half an hour. And you're right, and there's some fairly impressive celebrity impersonations. There's some rock and roll dancing.
Yeah.
I'll pay it. The puppet work or costume work, what do you want to call them, the costume effects, the creature effects, were kind of impressive. They look good. The giant at one point encounter a giant mechanical spider thing. It looks a little bit like the part of it looks like the thing that greeted R2D2 and C-3PO at Jabba's palace in Return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
How rude. But it was again, it was, I assume that was puppetry. That looked really nice.
A combination of puppetry and stop motion animation, and it worked well because
it really looked good. But the weird thing is, it doesn't look like it belongs in this film. It looks like it belongs in the Terry Gilliam film or something like that.
Yeah, that's very true. That is very. But I think, kind of thinking back on it, because I remember kind of loving every moment of this until you meet the aliens, and then it's a big letdown. But I think that's actually part of the point. And the fact that these alien kids have reached out to kids as well, because all they know is TV, but they want to learn more. It's like there's an interesting message to that, I guess, potentially, of the danger and the hazard of social media and what we are force fed on a daily basis, what we do. And
on the phone. Don't reveal all our secrets. I'm fairly certain though,
there's no one
wasn't making a point about social media though in 1985.
Well, they had wireless connection to computers then, obviously. So this was a prophecy movie.
I do love that about 80s movies. Computers can do whatever you need them to do.
Anything you need them to do, they can do it. War games, perfect example.
This is a fine example of that. This computer, apparently they used a $35,000 custom-built computer for a lot of the scenes in this film, because the computers at the time literally weren't capable of doing what the film needed them to do. But I guess the key point to is to remember is that we're being a little bit critical of the third act, is that this is not the film that Joe Dante wanted to make.
No.
The film, but note here on IMDb's trivia section says the film was in a prolonged editing phase when the studio moved up the release date. The theatrical release was a result of accelerated editing and was not finished to the director's satisfaction. The studio told director Joe Dante that he was finished, but they were going to go ahead and release what he had at that point. Joe Dante, I think, in interviews was basically described as being the film was dumped. It was a complete flop, a bit of a flop at release. It was released a week after Back to the Future, so bad timing.
Yeah.
It made about $10 million, I think, in the US. And it basically didn't do a whole lot better everywhere else in the world. And it was kind of one of those films that came back, found its second life in on home video. Yeah. But the original cut, according to Dante, was 3 hours and 15 minutes long. So if it was 2022, he'd probably get to release a 3-hour version of Explorers. And
release the Dante cut. There we go.
He probably would have released it anyway. Like if you're releasing a 3-hour version of Batman, he would have got 2.5 hours for this. So this is an hour 49 minutes is the cut according to IMDb. There are some slightly different cuts out there, I think, bits and pieces in it, but there is an hour 20 or so of content that was cut out of it, and that's fine, right? I mean, no one's going to suggest you release a 3-hour cut of a family movie in the mid 80s. That just wasn't the done thing. But like, from what I hear is there was a lot of stuff cut out, a lot of subplots and different things that cut out that might have made the film, made that third act make a little bit more sense or fit in a little bit better with the rest of the film.
Yeah, I think you're right. But let's talk a little more specifically about the trio of young actors, because as we've said at the start, this is Ethan Hawke's first feature film. It was River Phoenix's first, or one of the very earliest. Jason Preston hadn't really done anything before this either, and yet they nail their character stereotypes perfectly and are charming.
They are actually, and they're really great together.
Mm-hmm.
River Phoenix was originally cast as Darren, the role played by Jason Preston.
Okay.
But for some reason they decided on Jason Preston instead. So, oopsie daisy, there you almost skipped over the major film star. But they decided to keep River Phoenix on in the role of Wolfgang. Interesting, Jason Preston did not go on to do very much as an actor, I don't believe. You can always tell that by IMDb when their photo for a child actor is them or as a child.
Yeah.
But, not much. His last film was a TV movie in 1997. So
there we go.
Whatever reason, Jason decided not to go on with it. But also, one of the things I also enjoyed about this was the reviews aren't good. The best score on this is 58.
Yeah.
The worst review, at least on IMDb's list here, is one from the Washington Post by Paul Atanasio. The kids are uniformly god-awful, particularly the lamentably named Phoenix. Their wooden line readings play in long, flat scenes that look like some 12-year-old school project. And talking about the movie's sense of pace is like talking about Pikes Peak's sense of pace. I don't know what Pikes Peak was. Explorers is a veritable jungle of thematic and story threads that are never picked up. I just like that line about the lamentably named Phoenix, who would go on to be one of the biggest movie stars of the next 15 years. But, don't mention the war. I can understand part of that review in a sense, those thematic friends that kind of didn't get tied up a lot of way. But calling the kids god-awful, I think, is a complete mistake. I thought they were fantastic.
So unfair.
And you look at especially Hawke and Phoenix, and maybe this is confirmation bias because we know what they went on to become. But you can see that they were stars in the making. They had something about them on screen.
Yeah, absolutely. There was kind of the childlike innocence that Ethan Hawke brings to Ben. It's not saccharine sweet either. That's the line that quite often can end up going. It's like you end up becoming Little Orphan Annie, and it's like, oh no, you are too fucking cute. Fuck off and die. He is just a kid who is just really excitable and passionate about these things and doesn't actually have very good social skills because he's specialized himself out of it in an unusual way. He's absolutely delightful. He's in the same way that what was the name of the kid in Neverending Story?
I don't remember the actor's name, but yeah.
It's kind of that kind of caliber of like this kid's just knows the character, knows what he needs to bring to it, and he did so well. And then looking at River playing Wolfgang, especially when going back and looking at what he went on to do, he managed to get his against typecast role at the start of his career, and he did really well with it. He was socially awkward, but in a different way to the way that Ben was, because he was just so logically minded. There was that element of kind of Spockish nature to him, and that compulsive obsessive nature of science will out. And then you look at the family that he's surrounded by, and it makes sense. So,
but interestingly, I think part of the reason for that might be that River Phoenix famously grew up in a series of South American communes with his parents, and Joaquin, who at the time was known as Leith, I think. And so there's a story you can find it in the trivia on IMDb, but apparently he didn't get a lot of the pop culture references that were in the script because he wasn't familiar with them.
Yeah.
But I think what that brings to the role for him is he is a bit of an outsider in the real world at that point in time. He is not the kind of awkward kid in a sense. He's not used to being a part of a society that he's now finding himself in.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as a tie-in to what we were saying about things being cut out, I feel like there was a lot cut out for him meeting up with Neat at the end, and just him just hanging out like Zaphod Beeblebrox just with a random alien. It's like, okay, you seem strangely comfortable with this alien suddenly. Yeah, there's story that got missed out there.
Yeah, a kid totally grew up to be a school shooter. You just know it. There's something wrong with that kid. I found one of the things I found a little odd about, well, it didn't quite work for me, and it kind of stands out like dog's balls in this film, is the character of Laurie Swenson.
Yeah.
Who is Ben Crandall's the apple of his eye. He's the object of his affection. And there is some stuff in here about, oh, hey, we can take the spaceship up and we can look in the girls' locker room and stuff like that. A bit porkies about it. And you're like, no, I don't think you do that today.
No.
And at one point in time, Ben actually does use the bubble to actually spy on Laurie's bedroom, which is a little bit creepy for a 8 or 9-year-old kid, I guess. Well, how old do you reckon they are? 9, 10?
I would guess about 10.
Yeah. It's a bit creepy for a kid to do that, but it's the 80s. But then it sort of talks a little bit about her. He walks past at one point and goes, I would say, give anything to see in her bedroom. He sees her combing her hair in the window. And then she pops up at the end in their final dream sequence. So
it's because he's the alien that what dreams are made of.
He gets a pendant of the aliens at the end, and this somehow sparks a dream sequence in class at the end, which she is a part of, and she's flying with them, the 3 boys. And you're like, what? You've kind of been absent for the story for her an hour now. We haven't even mentioned you since, it kind of, I assume there was something, there was some sort of connective tissue that was supposed to be in there at that point, which ended up on the cutting room floor, which would have made sense why Laurie is so important enough to get the scene at the end of them flying when there really didn't seem to be any reason for that.
Yeah. I think it's kind of ultimately really a tale of two movies by the first 2/3 and then that last third where so much is obviously missing and so much was not completed. This is a proto Game of Thrones. And it just fails ultimately there. But for so much of this, for the ground-based stuff, them bonding as a trilogy and just working it all out and having that childlike delight of going, yeah, we could theory use this to move around, and then it just mayhem ensues. It's brilliant. It's really, really good. It's a lost gem.
It is. There's so much of this that gets right. That the magic of exploration, which I think obviously in the title it's about explorers, the magic of using your there being no limits to what your imagination can achieve with with a bit of a can-do attitude in there. That optimism, hope that comes with being a young kid in that age, growing up in a pretty special time in their country.
Yeah. There's a great line between Wolfgang and Ben where Wolfgang kind of just looks over his shoulder and is like, how did you come up with this? And Ben just goes, I guess I'm just that guy, I guess.
Yeah.
It's like,
which again feeds into that American myth of the special individual, the coming up with the great idea, the Steve Jobs, the Henry Ford, the Thomas Edison kind of characters. And Sorry, I'm getting sociological on this again. But yeah, it really encompasses. I can't really communicate to you how this captured my imagination as an 89-year-old kid seeing kids who look like me, which we've talked about representation before. Who look at me who are doing something I wish I could do. And actually really having an incredible adventure. I think we all wanted to have an incredible adventure when we were that age. But an incredible adventure probably meant riding your bikes down to the train tracks and throwing rocks at the passing train. Which
it was the imagination. That's the thing. It's like you came off. This is a direct response of the first 2/3 of the ET movies, where it's the delight and the surprise and the wonder of having that special thing and being on your BMX and suddenly being able to fly, and your imagination goes, wow, this is the next step of that fantasy fulfillment for a kid, where it's like, yeah, I have imagined as a kid to fly and to go off and into the stars, and like they're literally showing me what I play as a kid. Yes, thank you. Cool, done.
You're right. It's a bit of a hidden gem, not perfect, and
No.
I'm not going to blame Joe Dante for this. He said he finds this difficult to look at. While he welcomes the cult status, he finds it difficult to look at because this is not the film that he wanted to make.
Yeah.
So which must be hard for a creative person who probably worked very hard on this for a long time to have it taken out of his hands for spurious reasons. But if you can ignore that, I still think I would be fascinated to know what a kid today would make of this. Like, would it be a bit naff? Would it be overlit? Would it be saccharine to them? Would it be saccharinely optimistic? Would the rampant optimism be kind of really obvious and cloying to a kid today who grew up in a more cynical age?
Okay, so sub question here: do you think that this is the kind of movie that could be remade today?
No, it's been attempted. It's been attempted twice. Joe Dante was involved in an attempted remake in 2014.
Okay.
And I think Cary Fukunaga, the guy who did is that his name? One of the James Bond films.
Yeah.
And the guy who directed The Green Knight last year, where a couple of years ago we're working on an attempted adaptation for Paramount. So I don't know. That was the last word of either of those happening. So I would have to say yes. If someone like Dante was involved, it's 8 years now, but only 3 or 4 years ago, people like Cary Fukunaga were attempting to do work on something like this, and I would take their word on this stuff a little better than mine. It would be interesting to see what something like this would look like.
Yeah, because I can't imagine it being this optimistic.
No, optimism would have to be dialed down.
Yeah,
and the goofy alien stuff would have to be revised. I feel like that's the part that just wouldn't fly today.
I do kind of wonder if they could still keep the fact that the aliens are young, and the punchline of them just being kids, kind of in the same scenario as the kids that we followed for the movie. I wonder if they can keep that, but at the same time,
I think that's an important part of it. I mean, I think one of the things I found myself thinking while watching it is this is Joe Dante's childhood, updated to the 80s. So these are kids obsessed with 50s sci-fi, Robert Heinlein, This Island Earth, War of the Worlds. These are the films that Joe Dante would have grown up watching. He was born in 1946. So you would have seen those sci-fi films of the 50s and 60s would have been his fare. I have to imagine if we remade it now, you'd struggle, I think, to make that work if you're going to have kids again obsessed with 50s sci-fi. I think you'd have to be more Star Wars obsessed kids, right?
Because I kind of wonder about it. It's a weird juxtaposition for the character of Ben, the 50s and 60s sci-fi, where the aliens were always the bad guy. And it was all about for lack of a better descriptor than what it genuinely was, the great white hero saving the galaxy, saving the universe. You think Flash Gordon and that kind of character, that's who it was. And then in that time, we've not really had a particularly sympathetic alien story or a fun alien story like E.T. It's generally malevolent force coming in, and it would be one hell of a breath of fresh air to do that.
Well, I guess it's just also we have to remember that this is a kids' film, so he's probably not going to get away with them sort of having a malevolent alien trying to hunt the kids down. And if you are talking benevolent aliens, I will point out and say one benevolent alien of that time period was the day the Earth stood still. The main alien that was actually benevolent, and the humans were the villain in that film.
That is true. That is
so
true.
That's one.
I stand corrected on one.
I enjoy going back to this though. It does pull hard on the nostalgia strings for someone who grew up in the 80s. As I said, maybe it wouldn't play that well if you didn't, and maybe doesn't play quite as hard for you in a sense that like you were 4 or 5 years behind yourself and your brother, and in your sort of, you maybe don't remember this time period quite as well as us, but it was a fun time to go back to and go remember how much this thing meant to me when I first saw it.
Yeah. The last thing that I will quickly just point on is that the Explorers theme music that plays throughout it, written and created by the legend of scores, Jerry Goldsmith. It captured the essence of the movie so perfectly. It's that boom, 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 boom. It was just like that kind of beat that was really simple, but it's like, okay, this is going to be keeping me going, and the trumpets coming in, ba, 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 and it just always, everything was infusing this sense of optimism and hope. And Jerry was so good at being able to do that. You think of how comparing that to something like the music that he did for LA Confidential, or I think it was him that did the Alien music as well. Just slightly iconic. He knows how to use music to elicit emotions and pair well with visuals and story.
It was actually, I noticed that as well. Thank you for pointing it out. It was he was very lucky to have someone that talented involved in his project.
Yeah, 100%.
And it goes to show at one point in time they must have really believed in this.
Yeah, because this was at the height of Jerry's power, and Joe was a rising star during the 80s. He was hitting goals. So,
and at one point they had Wolfgang Peterson attached, and he wanted to film it in Germany, and they said, yeah, nah. So you hire the hottest director in town, the hottest composer in town, and you go, yeah, I'm going to dump this on the market, not interested. So who knows what the reason was, but they must have believed in it at one point.
Yeah. Now, sir, you have the keys.
Yes, and I actually made my decision last week when you told me what this film was. There were some choices at play. I could have gone with something like Small Soldiers to Joe Dante, which I've never seen, or something else he did in the 80s. But there were a few links out of it. Robert Picardo was in a lot of stuff. I mean, Total Recall was an attractive proposition. For Johnny Cap, but no, we are going to follow the late great River Phoenix. What a loss he was. And again, there's a lot we can pick for in his unfortunately short career. But I decided to pick a film that I've actually never seen before. But hopefully, probably something I should have seen before. It should provide you some easy exits, but it should be an interesting discussion nonetheless. And that is the 1991 My Own Private Idaho.
You know what? I've never seen this either. So this is a good call.
One of those films I think you were supposed to see in the 90s.
Yeah.
I was a little bit young when this came out. I was 14 when this came out, and I just missed the boat. So this is two best friends living on the streets of Portland as hustlers embark on a journey of self-discovery and find their relationship stumbling along the way. This is directed by Gus Van Sant, written by Gus Van Sant, and some jobber I've never heard of called William Shakespeare. He's never got any more work, I'm sure. Apparently this is based on Henry IV. I didn't know that. But that opens up a couple of doors for me if you want to go down the path of Shakespeare as a writer. I think he might have written a couple episodes of Family Matters or something.
I think he did a couple of episodes of Law and Order.
Could have done.
Yeah.
So this film stars River Phoenix, the much beloved Keanu Reeves. I don't think we've used him before. James Russo flees in it. Udo Kier.
that's probably the route I'm gonna go. I have no idea where, but he turns up in some weird fucking shit, man.
Or you could probably Flea was, of course, in the Back to the Future films, if you want to stay to the 80s, but you will have no problem getting out of it. And hopefully it's a good film. It's got a good rating, and it was very famous in its day. And it's got Keanu in it, so everyone loves Keanu.
Yeah. All right, nice call, nice choice. I'm looking forward to getting that. And looks like it's pretty easily available as well. Yay!
Right, yeah, for films we can actually pay to watch. We can actually watch legally. We can give you our money, Hollywood. Without having to resort to underhanded tactics to actually get our hands on things that we would like to view today.
Now, do we want to have just a short catch up on the latest Peacemaker before we go to our sponsors?
By all means.
Yeah, cool. Let's do that then. So
I'm up to episode 3. I know there are 4 out there.
I have watched. I think the last one I watched was A Chode of My Own or something. Titled that way. It was either 3 or 4. I can't remember.
So we'll quickly look that up so I don't give away any spoilers.
I will
so
do
we
that.
can talk safely about episode 2, because we have both watched. I actually watched 2 episodes last night just before bed, and ended up dreaming a lot about John Cena. And by the way, that is the 4th episode. By the way, you've seen all 4 if you've seen Chode.
So I will not go into details on number 4.
We have met a couple of new characters by the time we get to episode 3, which I've watched. We've now met Vigilante, and we've also met Judo Master.
Yes,
which is kind of a goofy name and a goofy looking character, but I assume he has some lore in the DC universe.
Yeah, I don't know anything about him, but it's Judo Master, the outfit, and just the ridiculousness of it. That is the most Super that this show has been so far to me. It looks like straight out of Super.
Just a lot of it really feels a lot like Super. The whole show feels a lot like Super. Peacemaker is a little bit more capable than Rainn Wilson's Crimson Bolt, but he is a very similar character to the Crimson Bolt.
Yeah, in so many ways, but consistently, we talked about it for the first episode about how well-rounded the character of Christopher Smith, Peacemaker, is, and how well John Cena is doing with that. And he's really going into some interesting places, just breaking into that character and into the psyche of that character, and just the emotional turmoil that comes around with it. It's like, damn.
There's a great scene in, I think, the second, I can't remember which episode it was, but where he actually goes back to his trailer and is actually crying.
Yeah.
Which is not something you see a lot of superheroes do. And it kind of feeds into some of the pathos that we talked about last week of the character having basically no father and, being a emotionally immature man-child.
We witness him basically have a nervous breakdown. And he sells it really well, and you can't help but feel sorry for him. But then the delightful flip of that is like, oh, what are you doing, you fucking pervert? You got the dick out. Straight away go back.
Great conversation about having dicks out, and ended him, dude, look at my crotch. We learn a lot more. We've learned a little bit more now in episode 3 about what the butterflies are.
Yep.
That's a nice link back to episode 1 when talking about the project code names.
Yep.
Which I thought was a nice nod. And you're right, there is a bit of a breakdown in the sense that the Peacemaker actually has the opportunity. He's actually tasked with shooting a senator and can't bring himself to actually pull the trigger to kill children, which is actually in a nice callback. Harcourt says to him, what about, I adore peace, and, I don't care how many men, women, and children I have to kill and torture to get it. And he goes, yeah, I do say that, don't I? But I still prefer not to kill kids.
Yeah.
So this is kind of nice little gradual transformation here from taking Peacemaker from being the guy who was a bad guy at the end of the Suicide Squad to being back. He's almost resurrecting the character a little bit,
Yeah. It's going to be really interesting kind of where they end with the character as well, because he's going on a roller coaster of evolution for his man-child, as we've said, and he's being put through the ringer in many ways. He's beaten up and beaten and outsmarted and outpaced, and frequently comes up short in just arguments with the rest of his team, in fights and things like that. And it's a real sobering affair for him when he, especially at the start, when he's talking to the cleaner, when he's told that he can leave the hospital. It's like, I'm a fucking superhero. It's like, no, you're not. You're one of those fucking psychopaths. And he's like detachment from his own reality. And now he's being repeatedly slapped in the face with a cold fish, saying, "This is real. Stop it." It's brilliant.
I've enjoyed the we said Kudo Master looked a bit goofy, but I thought they handled it quite nicely. He did beat the shit out of Peacemaker and Vigilante, which of course he kind of knew he was going to do, because he actually doesn't look like he can. So
Yeah.
he's quite a small, diminutive, I think is the way to put it. Character. He's quite small, which Peacemaker is keen to point out to him when he gets tied up. The torture scenes were a little bit full on in the third episode.
Yeah, they're definitely not pulling any punches, and I really approve of that, because so far there's not really anyone who's actually just the quintessential nice or good guy in any of these characters. They've all got fucked up mysteries and things. I think the closest that we've got to it is where is she? Seriously, she's not in the top 5. There we go. Daniela Brooks, Leota. She seems genuinely struggling with some of the morality of the things that she's doing, but that doesn't stop her from doing some really fucked up things as well.
I enjoyed the second episode. A big part of it is about him escaping the building in which the first episode ended, which actually is, as usual, genuinely hilarious, of him trying to escape building with the same time as collecting up the dead person's record collection and CD collection and take it with him, but also tying up taking a couple hostage in their house and tying them up.
And just flirting with the woman as well.
Pretty much. And, picking her up and starting a hilarious conversation about music between the husband and wife, the wife being a big fan of the hair metal band Cinderella, and complaining, but her husband always talking about Coldplay and Foster the People, and you're like, oh, this is my jam. So it remains incredibly violent, crass, juvenile, and yet hilarious and fun and moderately touching. Yeah,
it's doing a really, really good job of attempting to juggle many different types, and it's just doing really well. Like, the story as it's progressing is answering enough questions, but posing more that you consistently feel satisfied and hungry for more every episode so far. I want to know where this is leading. I want to know more about the butterflies. I want to know more about what her name's completely gone out of Amanda Waller has actually got, what her overall plan is for all of this as well. It's got a good level of persistent intrigue.
It's a lot of fun. It's pretty good for something he wrote in 8 weeks while he was bored during the first lockdown and had no intention of ever actually making. But and I believe it's doing quite well. I think from what I've read around the place, it's getting. I think obviously it's very well rated. I read some stuff on Twitter today about it being one of the more in-demand series at the moment. So hopefully that's a good thing in a sense. It's really hard to judge with things like HBO Max. Like, I mean, I assume Netflix and that they'll have stats and they'll go, well, we heard recently there's a show on Netflix called Manifest. I don't know if it's kicking around. It's like Lost if the writers were really terrible. And considering how terrible and had no budget. And it was made for NBC, and then they canned it, I think, after 2 seasons, and it's been picked up by Netflix, and now it's been like number 1 all around the world because I guess people this time of year people watch a lot of telly. And I think that may have read they're getting another season, despite the fact of being canned.
There's been a number of shows that Netflix have picked up and kind of gone to try and finish to just finish it off. Like Lucifer was one of the famous ones that they did. They ended up doing
Development's another one.
Yeah, could.
I think mind you, the show is objectively terrible. But I might go back and watch some more anyway. But it's pretty cheap and pretty nasty and pretty crappy. But you know, I see stats. It's like it's hundreds of millions of hours of watching this has been clocked up. I assume that's how these streaming services make a call on whether or not the show has actually been successful, and that's something that they were pleased about. So I'm assuming then if like this gets that kind of viewership, what I would like them to see, I would like to see them give James Gunn more money and go, would you like to make more shit?
Yes.
And hopefully which he would say yes after Guardians 3.
Yes.
But or not even that, but maybe more stuff like this, and less of that garbage that DC have been making on the CW, like Batwoman and Flash and Arrow and whatever that one with the guys out of Prison Break was. It's they are fucking terrible. Those shows, they are terrible.
They are cookie cutter shows. They are cookie cutter.
Cookie cutter shows for children and teens. I don't know who's making. Who they're making? They had a Crisis on Infinite Earths, in I think it was Supergirl and Batwoman, and I actually tried to download it and watch it. Like it was one of the worst things I've ever seen in my life.
The worst part about all of those shows is there is not one single streaming service that has all of them. You have to subscribe to like 3 or 4. So when they do these, it's a seasonal thing. Every year they have this seasonal crossover. Arrow and Flash did it, and then they started bringing in Legends of Tomorrow, and then they brought in Supergirl, and then it just kept on getting bigger and bigger until they did Infinite Crisis. And it's like, okay, no one is signed up for all of these. Go fuck yourself. Sorry, I'm not giving you $80 in 1 month just to watch one complete episode because you've segmented it into 12 sections. Sorry, fuck off.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if it's like that in the States or it's just us who are subjected to that. Like,
we are the world's poorest citizens.
I mean, it's a little bit like the Star Trek shows are kind of all over the shop now. Like, if you want to follow all of those, anyway, but if you really want to follow Star Trek shows that are on television right now, you're a very, very sad individual. But anyway, I'm just saying it. I hope it gets that viewership because more shows with genuine creative talent writing them. Like, obviously, not everyone's James Gunn, but like there would be another James Gunn out there somewhere who's looking for an opportunity to do this, and take a risk with some of these lesser known characters. And is actually a fine way to maybe introduce them to whatever you decide to do with the DC universe moving forward. What's fun about this show occasionally is they reference the fact that like other heroes exist. We talked about it last week, but the character John Economos mentions, I would rather be working with Harley Quinn than you, or Batmite, or Dollman they were talking about. I didn't Google them, but I assume these are all legitimate DC characters.
Yeah, they are. I hope that they keep the relationship going between James Gunn and DC because he has done some really good work. Even if they get him to be almost a pseudo Kevin Feige and is going, okay, I want you to pitch us your ideas and Godfather these things and see how we do with that. We're not going to give you the holy trinity of Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman because apparently no one's allowed to touch those unless they've got nude photos of executives. But it's like, okay, you know what? We keep on getting people keep on asking for Justice League Dark. What could you do with that? That could play into your wheelhouse of a bit edgier, right? I still think it's a mistake that they didn't get Guillermo del Toro to go through with his pitch for that because that would have been fucking cool.
I mean, again, they go back to 15 years. They made a mistake by not having George Miller do his Justice League film.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, it sounds weird in hindsight, but it's George fucking Miller, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, we saw what he did with Fury Road, which is the next thing he did after that. The guy is a legend.
Yeah.
But I mean, it couldn't have been any worse than what Zack Snyder and Joss Whedon pumped out in the end. I mean, ignoring the 4-hour version, which was all right. Anyway, that's it. Yeah, I'm keen to see what keeps going. It's been a lot of fun so far. But then again, I'm a massive simp for James Gunn.
Yeah.
I think John Cena does an amazing job of his character.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be interesting to see what Cena goes on to do, because he does comedy and action really well, which is a little bit interesting because that's what Dwayne Johnson does really well. And I always felt that I would have been fascinated to see Dwayne Johnson take on a genuinely serious, legitimate adult role. Not a comedy, not an action role. I want to see him playing a grown-up in a film. And I mean, he knows which side his bread's buttered on. He's not going to do that. He's going to take his $20 million paydays.
I mean, I guess part of the problem is I have issues with The Rock. I respect his game. He is the biggest self-promoter. He is fucking on it all the time. But there was this thing that came out just the other day about he wanted to surpass the comic book representation of Black Adam. And it made me realize one of the things that I don't like about him as a performer is that he doesn't play roles. He twists those roles to be him. And it's generally worked, but it's kind of getting tiring now. But at the same time, when you look like the fucking Rock, it's gonna look fucking stupid just going, all right, this is average Joe. We're gonna put him in, I don't know, a Wes Anderson movie. It's just, he's gonna look weird.
I think it would look, I would back Wes to do it.
Oh, no, I believe that Wes would be able to do it. I don't know if The Rock would do a movie like that, but...
I wonder about someone like that. I mean, what motivates him?
Yeah.
Right? Like, as an artist, you know, I mean, what does he get out of it? He gets paid massive money now to do this shit. He's doing San Andreas 2. I assume he's getting paid big money by DC to do Black Adam. He wouldn't be short of coin. I mean, he would have been paid massive money to do all those Fast movies. So I wonder about people like this, and I go, is it money that motivates you moving forward? Obviously, everyone likes to get paid well for their work. As a great man once said, if you're good at something, never do it for free. But what is it that motivates you to move forward and keep doing things? If he's enjoying what he's doing, well, I guess that's one thing. But is there never a desire to extend yourself a little bit, to wade out a little bit further than you feel comfortable? Like, to be, if you're an actor, I assume there's some respect for the craft. Would you not want to try and play, someone in a film by Paul Thomas Anderson? Like, think of a film like one of my favorites, Punch Drunk Love, where Adam Sandler played very similar role he always plays, but he was put through the lens of a really talented artist to become something quite sinister in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And something completely different that all the Adam Sandler fans apparently hate. But, that's the kind of thing I would sort of think, would you not want to test yourself? Why would you not want to go to Quentin Tarantino and go, I don't care, any role, anytime, any place, I want to be in one of your movies, and maybe Quentin would not be interested. I don't know. Would you not want to be in the next Scorsese film, or Christopher Nolan, or do something really outrageous? I think of Tom Cruise in Magnolia.
Yes.
Or if we go to Tom Cruise in, what was it, Eyes Wide Shut, that was a fairly un-Tom Cruise-y kind of role for him. And in fairness, people don't like Tom, but A, he can act when he wants to, and B, at points in his career, he has been brave enough to step outside the bounds of what everybody knows him for and do stuff that's a little bit weird and challenging. So that's what I wonder about people like that who are so successful at doing one thing over and over again. Is there never a motivation to take that chance to go, okay, I'll do San Andreas 2, but I want to do this indie film over here, and you're going to pay for it? Yeah.
Like, it would, just to see him just turn up in one of the Knives Out movies. Just completely out there. I would love to see him do the villain role as well. He can just be a villain. Because he was good at being an asshole in the WWF Attitude Era. He was good at being the corporate rock, the people's, the corporate elbow and all of that shit. He knows how to do it, but he it's almost feels like he's scared of people not liking him, and he doesn't seem to make any difference at the moment between liking and respecting. And like, you think of some of the people who are phenomenal as bad guys. You think of
Mads Mikkelsen.
Yeah, he is hugely respected. People really love him, but he's fucking terrifying when he's on screen.
Well, Christoph Waltz, his whole career started out doing the Nazi, the Jew hunter, and now I think he's got quite a following. Like,
yeah,
people enjoy watching him as a villain.
Exactly, and that there is that scope if you can put the effort in, which The Rock puts the effort in for the roles. He works out and he tries hard and he practices and he practices and he practices. He can do it. I want to see him take a chance.
This is where I think about when you're so successful. Like I said, well, what's next? There's got to be something else out there other than money.
Yeah.
We've gone on for a long time on this one, and I wanted to keep our promise and keep it under 2 hours today. So, time for our sponsor of the day.
Yes,
our sponsor of the day is the 1989, I think, apocalyptic classic, Rollerblade Warriors Taken by Force. But just as a special treat for our viewers, because I know you deserve it, this is dubbed in Russian. Badly.
Oh,
badly.
Fantastic. Get that queued up. Don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, to like, share, and subscribe. It does help us get a bit more visibility. You can donate on Twitch as well.
Кэтлин Кинланд в фильме «Воины-роллеры». После Великого Потрясения, когда природа и человек объединились против самой жизни, появились святые крестоносцы, обладавшие способностью исцелять больных и сражаться с теми, кто был готов убить за уцелевшие богатства мира, лежавшего в руинах. Космический орден воинов-роллеров отправил своего лучшего воина, Карен Кросс, сопровождать ясновидящую Гретчен Хоуп из монастыря в горах в кипящую бездну ада. Гретчен ничего не знает о войне и любви, но она видит все, что было, есть и будет. Она научит Карен и других сестер Ордена защищать слабых и освобождать души проклятых. Некоторые из выживших со временем сошли с ума, что делало их не менее опасными. Единственным средством от этой болезни было очищение мечом. Карен Кросс балансировала на тонкой грани между жизнью и смертью. Лишь она одна сопровождает Гретчен Хоуп. Но им предстоит преодолеть бездну ада и меня.
This is not.
Как долго действует эта дрянь? Нельзя допустить, чтобы он начнется.
This is a great film, by the way. If you haven't seen the whole thing, I recommend it.
Так, накрасим ноготочки, пару штрихов. Штрихов?
It's well in the oeuvre of rollerblade post-apocalyptic films. Yes, I think it's genuinely acknowledged as a Citizen Kane. of that genre.
Какие полные губы.
I mean, I think makeup is an important part of every
Всё, что
post-apocalyptic
Yeah.
rollerblade warrior's morning routine.
А если нет?
Gotta look good. Gotta be blade.
Думаешь,
If you're going to be I mean, exactly, you're not a rollerblade.
надо
Not everyone gets
побыстрее
to be a
закончить,
rollerblade warrior.
ждет.
It's true.
And that's a pretty good haircut for a post-apocalyptic. Oh, saucy.
Ooh, saucy. That's enough of that. Good.
That's a bit above the knee there. I think it's, we'll cancel all of that.
Show.
If you're enjoying that, that is available on YouTube in Russian.
It's the best way of watching it if you can't watch it in the original Klingon.
True. But, it's out there if you want it. So if you're so inclined, I have actually seen the original film. So I can say that you haven't lived until you've seen it in the original Klingon.
Did you ever see a movie with Jason Patrick called Roller Babies?
No, I didn't see that one.
Oh, that's bad. It's so bad. It's good, but it's bad. I will not take us there, I promise. Because that would involve.
Wow, I mean, there's always a temptation. If I ever make a mistake, I know what's coming my way.
I don't know if I'm that cruel. Now, where are we going to go to next?
Well, let's talk a little. It is technically Australia Day today, as I hinted at the start, or Invasion Day, or any of the different titles you'd like to give it. I think changing the date's probably a very good idea at this point in time, but I don't expect that to happen anytime soon. But given it is in this day where we talk a lot about Australia, I thought I would talk about an Australian film that I got to see. We don't talk a lot about Aussie film. Like the last one we talked about was Nitram, the Martin Bryant film from late last year. They don't come out a lot. There's a lot of TV, I think, these days being made for Stan in particular. But streaming service I don't have anymore. But Australian films, they're a little harder to come by these days. So the merger was made in 2018. But I only heard about it a couple of weeks ago. And it is Troy Carrington, a former professional footballer, returns to his country town after an abrupt end to his sporting career and is persuaded to coach the hapless local footy team, the Roosters.
Okay.
In terms of stars, not terribly many you'd be familiar with. The biggest star in the film is John Howard, not the politician.
I was going to ask.
The actor. John Howard was in I don't even know how much of this you'll know, but he was in a film. I always remember him in a film called Young Einstein that came out about 1989. It was a great film. He apparently was in Mad Max Fury Road. He was in The Club, which I would love to have you watch sometime. It's an Australian classic. And just about every Australian film you could or TV show you can think of, he's been in it.
Okay.
But the real, I guess, creative force behind the film is Damien Callanan, who, is, to my knowledge, is actually most well known as a comedian, stand-up comedian. Also, does the sketch comedy for Australian TV shows and stuff like that. The Wedge is one that I think I can remember. You do not expect you to remember. This is before your time in the country.
I am not making notes, so I will not pass this test.
The Wedge, notably, was actually where Rebel Wilson really came to the public's notice for the first time, I think, on Australian television. Playing one character, the same character, over and over again. It was funny the first two times, and then afterwards you're like, oh no. But she's gone to bigger and better things. Damien Callanan wrote this. I believe it's based, and it says here, it's based on his one-man play, which I would have been fascinated to see. So it does revolve around the concept of Australian football, if you're unfamiliar with that. I know you are, because I've took you to that game, of course, where you noticed the lack of police.
It's so different compared to English football.
There was no stabbing.
Yeah, there's no stabbings. I didn't get hit with a chair. It was good. It was good times. I felt.
You call this a soccer, right? as a sort of notes, he is a former Australian football major league player, or the Australian Football League, AFL. And after breaking his leg while running through the banner on grand final day in 9 places, he has had to retire, and he's returned to his country town, which name escapes me right now. And he has kind of hasn't actually made a good name for himself upon his return. He led a march against an anti-logging march that ended up shutting down the local logging mill. And hence which has not been taken well by the local town, and hence he's known around town as Town Killer.
Wow. Okay.
That kind of introduces one of the unusual, shall I say, aspects to the film. That it really works hard to have a social conscience.
Okay.
It's working really hard to incorporate as many social messages as it can, not in a Star Trekian kind of way, which the idiots running the show there try and do these days, completely overt and slap you around the face.
Don't know what you mean.
Yeah. It's the message, or whatever you want to call it, that it infects a lot of popular television and film, which is so obvious what they're doing. It's very obvious here, but it's in a slightly more casual Australian way. So in addition to this town having had a significant green movement, it's also been chosen as a settlement site for a lot of refugees. So there's a refugee sort of settlement office in town. And that's sort of portrayed as, at least initially, as causing some consternation to the town people. Why are these bloody refos being brought here anyway? But against the backdrop of this, the local team, the Roosters, are basically being forced to merge with another club because they're essentially they don't have enough players, and their club rooms just need to be torn down because they're full of asbestos. Against the club's patriarch, if you will, played by John Howard here, as Bull Barlow, is in and out of hospital, some health issues. They don't have a coach for the coming season, and against that, Bull Barlow's daughter-in-law decides that maybe it'd be best to actually try and coax Damien Callanan's character to kind of come back into the fold and potentially coach the local footy team. At the same time, her son Neil, played by Rafferty Grierson, which is a really cracking name, by the way.
It is a good
name.
name.
What's your name? My name's Rafferty.
Yes.
Who was in Children of the Corn. They made another one of those. Great. He has as I said, he's Andy's son. His father has passed away, and he's decided to start making a documentary about Troy unwillingly to take part, about him, the fact that he's a hermit who has no friends. And through that, Andy sort of comes in contact with him and decides to try and bring him back in as the coach, which, of course, has to happen.
Of course.
And his philosophy as a coach is somewhat different. He decides to start bringing in, as a tactic to get enough players, start bringing some of these refugees who've been resettled in the town to play on the football team, including Saeed, played by Faisal Bazi. I am apologizing to him and anybody who knows how the right way to pronounce that, because I'm certain I didn't get it right. And he is he's actually really, really good in this. He plays a Syrian refugee who learned how to play football by playing the guards on Nauru while he was in immigration detention, and has actually heard of Damien Troy by reading Troy's book, being the only books he had access to in Nauru were AFL biographies. He's actually, I think, torture under the Geneva Convention. He's actually a really interesting actor. I thought he was wonderful in this. He's been kicking around. He's done some things. He was in Peter Rabbit a couple of years ago, a bunch of Australian television, and including a film called We're Not Here to Fuck Spiders, which I am genuinely interested in seeing if I can find that now. what a great name for a film. I'm sure that's going to be playing at your local multiplex all the time with a title like that. And as you can sort of imagine, this is not a particularly original story from there. It's basically Major League in Australia with refugees.
Okay.
It's trying really hard to sort of play into the same sort of space occupied by something like The Castle, which I think I forced you to watch as part of one of our Australian seasons a few years ago.
Wonderful. And I fully understand, having lived in Kinglake for all this time, I now understand the joke that is, how's the Serenity?
So much serenity.
Yeah.
And we've got a series of goofy characters who make up the football team, including Goober, Snapper, Carpet Burn, and Porterhouse and Harpo.
Those are perfect Australian translations of a Guy Ritchie movie, gangster movie.
It really would be, wouldn't it? Goober and Snapper and Carpet Burn. It's and they're not explaining why these nicknames are in there. It's on Netflix if you're in Australia. Weirdly has an interesting Shakespearean thread running through it. I won't give any more clues, and I actually had to go to my friend who's a Shakespearean actor, Marty, whose performance of Merchant of Venice, I believe, opens in the next couple of weeks in Melbourne. So fingers crossed for that one. I think it starts around about the 9th, if I'm not mistaken. But if you Google, if you're interested, it's in the northern suburbs of Melbourne. Please don't ask me exactly where it is. I'm sorry, Marty. I should know, but I've got my ticket, and I'm hoping that has the address on it. Just a plugger again. If you like your Shakespeare,
randomly turn up at any theatre and go, I've got this ticket. I'm going to see this.
Exactly. I just turn up at the movies with a ticket to Merchant of Venice, and I go, sir, this is a Wendy's.
That sounds like a you problem, not a me problem.
Exactly. But yeah, get along if you can. Support local theatre in Melbourne if you can. Well, that sounded interesting.
Yeah, it's just saying don't forget to do Armchair Producers.
Wow. Good reminder. Pro tip.
Nearly missed it.
But yes, there is a weird Shakespearean thread running through, which I had to tell Marty about being a Shakespearean actor herself. So there's a weird combination of different stuff going into this. The sort of very Australianisms of there's something like The Castle, the sports story in there, which we've seen done a lot of times in films like Major League. We've got this heavy influence of social conscience issues and particularly pro-refugee sort of messages in there as well, and sort of these odd concepts about art, like one of the players is an artist and a Shakespearean at the same time. A sort of a cross-culture thing happening in there, which is actually happening in Australian football to a degree. So, look, it's a weird little quirky little film, but I actually kind of liked it. It's not a particularly substantial film. This is not going to change your life. It only goes for an hour 43 minutes. It doesn't overstay its welcome like the Batman's going to. And look, if you're looking for something light and entertaining and fun, and particularly Australian, so overseas people, if you can find a copy, I don't know if it's going to pop up on your Netflix or not. I would recommend it. And a quick shout out to a friend of a show who recommended it to me. You know who you are.
That's not a very good shout out, Travis.
Not a very good shout out. Okay, well, yeah, it was trying to be mysterious about it. It was an old friend of a show and one-time co-host of a show, Trudy, actually recommended this to me. So, I think it's just because it was about football, I guess, and my reputation as a football fiend probably precedes me, and hence was the reason for getting it suggested. But it was a good call because it's actually a decent film.
Okay. I just spotted the tagline on the poster, and it's, if they can play, they can stay. That sounds like a tagline that like Arnold Palmer would use or something like that. No, Clive Palmer, not Arnold Palmer. He's a golfer.
Arnold Palmer might do it too. In fact, Damien Callanan's Troy has his character in the film actually has a line. His coaching philosophy is keep doing it until you're not shit. And I think that kind of sums up this podcast, but we'll stick at it, It's been 7 or 8 years now, but we'll get there.
We've hit peak podcast. Sorry. All right. Any other things to say on the merger?
No. Get out and see it if you can. Support Australian film, even if it's on Netflix.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I made the joke about Guy Ritchie side character name, so I'm going to go over to his latest movie, which is Wrath of Man, starring the Guy Ritchie machine. And I've forgotten his name. Wow, I really need to get some sleep. What's his name? Jason Statham. There we go.
Jason Statham. No-name actor there.
Yeah, a little no-name actor. This has popped up, and I've had a couple of people, like a friend of the show, Paul Storm, on Facebook. He gets to go and see a lot of movies. He has got the very, very, very respected Cineworld Cinema Pass, which I had when I was in London. So he can go to cinema as much as he wants for £15 a month. And it's incredibly good idea, and they should do it here as well, please. But he is someone who I don't think he's ever given a bad review. And he has seen Wrath of Man, and he recommended it. He said that I'd probably like it because it's not the typical Guy Ritchie movie of the one from a little while ago that we watched, The Gentleman, and his Lock, Stock, and Snatch, and all of those movies that he did. And to a degree, he's right. But this is a really, really strange movie for Guy Ritchie. So the plot follows H, Jason Statham's character, a cold and mysterious character working at a cash truck company responsible for moving hundreds of millions of dollars around Los Angeles each week. And just from the very opening of this, and especially doubled up because it happens to be in LA as well, you do get a bit of a Heat vibe. That gritty gangster kind of vibe to it. And the way that it kind of tells its story, it jumps backwards and forwards from kind of now to 3 months ago to 6 weeks from now. And it does that a lot, but it tries to play that cat and mouse kind of game without ever showing you the other party. Because essentially this is Jason Statham doing a whodunit. But we're never fully given everything until right near the end. And a lot of mythos is built up around Jason Statham's character. For example, there's he successfully stops a heist on one of the trains, and it kind of puts everyone on edge, and half the people that work with him kind of consider him this hero because he just got out and shot people easy and just saved everyone, saved the money. Other people start getting a bit suspicious and kind of wonder if he's maybe some kind of psychopath. But as it grows on, there's another heist that he is involved with. And as he comes out of the back, the guys that are there with guns and shit just suddenly, put him on the fucking ground. They suddenly recognize him and just run away. It's like, that's kind of cool. Are you going to elaborate on that? And to a point they do, but they never actually explain who the fuck he is, because he has a relationship, a working relationship with Andy Garcia, who's in this movie, called Agent King. And basically, Andy Garcia is there just to kind of pseudo-authorize Jason Statham to just kill these people. But it's an interesting cast. You've got Jason Statham, you've got Holt McCallany, who you definitely recognize the face for. He was in Fight Club.
And of course, more recently, Mindhunter.
Yes. So he's a good, solid actor, but he's doing a little bit of a weird role here. My boy Josh Hartnett turning up in an unusual role. It's good to see him still in movies, but I was hoping that he would be a bit bigger than a side.
He was a big star. Remember, he was a big star once upon a time.
Yeah.
He was starring alongside like Harrison Ford and Ben Affleck and stuff in really big films. And then
you mentioned the George Miller Justice League. He was going to be Superman or Batman or something. One of them, I think. It's got Jeffrey Donovan, who I'm a fan of because of Burn Notice. He was great in that. He was in Sicario, Day of the Dead, and The Changeling. Solid performance overall. And then as he's getting older, fuck me, Scott Eastwood is just getting more and more like his fucking dad. Jesus, he just looks just like him. But he is going a bit more of playing the slightly more unhinged kind of characters. And he does a good job overall here, but it ends up being a bit dull overall. It's got Eddie Marsan in there, who anyone who's ever watched anything that's British will instantly know him. He was in Peter Page in The World's End. He was in 21 Grams, The Disappearance of Alice Creed, which is actually a really good movie. He's popped up in a lot of stuff. Those are the main names that you're gonna just suddenly recognize as you watch this movie, if you do. Directed by Guy Ritchie, based on another on the film Le Convoyeur, and Guy Ritchie co-wrote the screenplay with Ivan Atkinson and Mark Davies. I think the script is the problem here, because Guy Ritchie has got a couple of kind of like cinematic things that he likes to do, like the in-your-face moving around, kind of permanently stay focused. He uses that tactic a couple of times. The time jumping and the slowing down and speeding up that he kind of did in the Sherlock Holmes movies that he made, it's all present and correct there. The fact that Jason Statham seems to be becoming like a poor man's Sean Connery of no matter where he is, he'll always have that London accent. I think he's actually supposed to be from London. Like, people refer to him as the Limey and things like that. So it writes in, but at the same time, it's like, okay. But his character seems to have be transcontinental in notoriety. You're not going to go into that? Okay, fine, whatever. It's just a bit of a mess, and it gets really convoluted trying to tell this really compelling story, but it's actually not, and there's no one to really empathize with. You would kind of assume, as he's the lead, you're supposed to build empathy for Jason Statham, but you really don't, because he is a broken, scary individual, and you're definitely not supposed to empathize with the bad guys because they're bad guys. But at the same time, they do put some sympathetic elements to it. But it never goes far enough with any of them, and it spreads itself too thin. So I guess it's a worthwhile streaming one if you can watch it for free. But
do you know where we can see it?
This was on Prime Video, I think it was.
Prime.
Yes.
Well, if it's on your streaming service, is it a good night out with a bit of popcorn, kind of?
Yeah, I mean, if you want something just there in the background, you're never too far away from an action scene, which are tolerable. They're not great. It's certainly not of a caliber of, despite how it really pushes to try and evoke imagery akin to something like Heat, it never, ever remotely reaches the heights of that for the action or the storytelling or the performances. But it's engaging enough that you can have it on in the background, your partner's around, and you want to have something just there whilst you have conversation, eat, and enjoy yourselves. It's fine. It's fine. I just think that Guy Ritchie he's going through a hard time. I really think he's finding it hard to find his voice and get money for it. Like, he famously was talking about on the I think it was the Joe Rogan podcast, where he said, if it's not a franchise, no one wants to give you a fucking cent, which tragically is very, very true.
I mean, he would actually, I was going to say, he's the kind of guy who's got one trick and does it again and again and again, like we're talking about The Rock. But I'll give him kudos. He did direct Aladdin a couple of years ago, and that was one that made us all go, huh? Disney musical, live action Disney musical, like, Guy Ritchie.
Exactly. He
did it. So
chances sometimes. So I would love to see him just be given like an angel investor and just go, okay, you are going to sit down for 6 months and nut out this screenplay, get who you need to help you, and then we're going to make your vision, because he seems to have lost his way in some way, or lost the bite that he had from his early movies, which really elevated him. That attack attitude has gone, and it's a lot softer and
I would argue that he does he's tried other things, but I think he only does do one thing well.
Mm.
And that's sort of quirky action crime comedies.
Yeah.
If we compare him to other people who, your Chris Nolans, your Paul Thomas Andersons, your Wes Andersons, your Quentin Tarantinos of the world, the really successful directors, but critically and commercially, they have a number of strings to their bow.
Yeah. I would like to see him just really find some material that sings and talks to him, because it just feels like this missed step.
Just to be confirmed, this is available in Australia on Binge and Foxtel.
Yes, Binge. That's where I watched it. Yes. But yeah, that's really all I wanted to say on Wrath of Man, because it doesn't do anything badly. It doesn't do anything particularly well. It's a very middle of the road safe movie. Yeah. I know that Guy Ritchie can do better. Jason Statham can't really. He just does that character, and that's what he does. That's fine. Scott Eastwood needs to get a starring role in something, because he's interesting. The small bit parts that he's been slowly but surely clocking up. I want to see him get out and do some shit. There was early, like a few years ago, there were people kind of saying, "Oh, he could be Wolverine," and yeah, he could. He's definitely got the physique ability for it. His hair just needs to be parted in the middle, and he's got the Wolverine fins. He would be an interesting choice for sure, because he can be charming, but at the same time, he can be brutal, which Wolverine goes berserk. He needs to be brutal. Yeah, that's it.
Not exactly a glowing endorsement, but I think if you're a fan of Guy Ritchie, it sounds like it might be the kind of thing you'd enjoy. If you really like his stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, we were a bit meh about On a Gentleman as well, if I recall correctly, from a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And I meet a lot of people who tell me how much they liked that.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a mystery to me. So I think maybe his stuff just appeals to a certain audience of people.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely true. Do you want to give your final thoughts on Yellow Jackets?
Yes. So people who watched or listened in last week might have heard my glowing review for the first, I think, 6 episodes of Yellow Jackets I'd covered to that point in time.
Mm-hmm.
For those who are not familiar with it, it's a TV show in Australia streaming on Paramount Plus. It's a Showtime show, so I don't know where Showtime stuff pops up in the US. Is it on Hulu? I don't know. But, if you get Showtime in your service places other than Australia, then this is where you watch it. A wildly talented A wildly talented high school girls soccer team becomes the unlucky survivors of a plane crash deep in the Canadian wilderness. Equal parts survival epic, psychological horror story, and coming of age drama. Yellow Jackets is a saga of a team of, high school girls, soccer players who become the survivors of a plane crash in a remote northern wilderness. The series chronicles their descent from a complicated but thriving team to savage clans, whilst also tracking the lives of attempted to piece back together nearly 25 years later. So, as I sort of noted last week, the show takes place in 2 time periods. We flick between what was going on in the 90s after the plane crash, and then flip forward to the survivors of that plane crash and what they're doing in the present day. And as it sort of notes, the travails and dramas that they're going through, living with the knowledge of what happened to them in the past, as it says, putting their lives back together, and the random shenanigans and dramas they get up to. Shenanigans probably doesn't give you the right impression. One of the real strengths of the show is its ensemble cast. In the present day, we have Melanie Linsky, Tawny Cypress, Christina Ricci, and Juliette Lewis. who are all doing some of their best work in this. I don't think we would have heard of any of the actors playing the their teen versions, but they would be Sophie Nélisse, Sophie Thatcher, Jasmine Brown, and Samantha Hanratty. Also calling out an honorable mention to Ella Purnell, who doesn't have adult. She doesn't survive. Fair enough. It's not a spoiler. You find out pretty early on.
Oh man!
But Jackie isn't one of it. Isn't represented in the present day.
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoyed the first half of the season. I think probably more in the second half of the season.
Okay.
I think it's still very good TV. Where I think it's falling down a little bit for me in the second half of the season is I think the pacing's a bit off. I think it really sets up, and it's really a victim of its own success. I think the first 5 or 6 episodes are some of the best television I've seen in years.
Mm-hmm.
And it sets the bar incredibly high for the rest of the series to live up to. And it doesn't quite, but it still comes pretty close. So it's still decent television. So it just seems to draw things out a little bit too much in the last 3 or 4 episodes. Where it's like, come on, you've been promising things, you've been setting up story elements, and things have been developing, but they just take so long to get there without actually doing anything new or interesting. You just seem to kill time, quite a bit of a time between interesting things happening. That you're kind of like, I'm getting a little bit slow here, guys.
Yeah.
And I guess for me, the final episode, I seem to be the odd one out here because a lot of people seem to really, really like the final episode. The whole series has an IMDb rating of 8.1. The last episode has an 8.4 on IMDb for what it's worth. Not terribly many votes, so maybe it's not. I kind of feel like, well, the first shot in the series is a girl is set in this time period in the 90s after the plane crash. A girl in what looks to be a 90 running through the snow in panic, falling into a pit of spikes and basically being impaled on those spikes.
Okay.
Or being hung up, and it's insinuated being cooked and eaten by the rest of the girls. Now, this is literally the first shot of the series. So no spoilers. It's like literally the first 2 or 3 minutes of a show.
A statement.
It is, and it's kind of setting something up. And it's not unusual to make us wait until the last episode to pave it off. But they didn't pave it off.
Oh.
In fact, there is very, very little payoff in the last episode. So there's quite a bit of stuff happening, as you can imagine, through 10 hours of TV. There's sort of lots of different story elements, lots of mysteries that sort of set up to go, I wonder what's really going on here. And kind of expecting, well, I know they've got a season 2. I don't know if they knew they had a season 2 when they wrote it. But at the same time, I expected a little bit of payoff for getting to the end. You get basically none. All it does is set up stuff for season 2. So things happen, and you're kind of like, who are those people? What's going on there? Hey, what's happening? Like, it's like 2 minutes to go. So, okay. And you still haven't told me who the girl was at the start. And again, like, I guess, people are like, well, you've got to set it up for season 2. And I'm like, yeah, that's cool. But I kind of watched all of your show to the end. I kind of want a little bit of a payoff. I want a little bit of a nibble to reward me for all that television, pay off some of your stories, reveal, and solve some of your mysteries. But it solves nothing. It gives us no payout, no payoff at all. Now, some people are obviously, I've read a lot of reviews online. People loved it. They thought it was brilliant. I'm like, I'm sorry. I was disappointed that I got nothing. They gave me nothing. And interestingly, I did a little bit of research. A lot of the major plot elements, apparently the writers, at least at the time of the interviews, didn't know how they were going to be resolved.
Stop doing this, writers.
I don't know how that's like. I was talking to someone to Michelle about this afternoon, who is a writer herself. And I was sort of curious, and you're a writer, so I'm curious in your opinion about. I mean, it's different, I guess, writing novels, which is what you both do. I mean, you've attempted screenplays as well. Your novel started out as a screenplay, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, as someone who's tried to write screenplays a few times, like, do you think you should know what what happens in your story when you write it? Like,
there's a certain element of fluidity, and like you write a story with a goal in mind. That's the point. Otherwise, the journey ends up becoming confusing and unnecessary because you haven't got anywhere to resolve it anyway. You haven't got that cathartic release. But yeah, it evolves as you like the finale is largely the same for me for all of my books that I've always had in my mind. How I get there has changed as I've learned more about the characters, and I'm sure that when you give your script to artists, directors, and things like that, they're going to say, oh, we need to just change this a little bit and that, and it's going to mutate a little bit the ending, but I can't see how they go into production. It's going, oh yeah, we haven't worked out where everyone ends up.
So there's a particular character who has a condition, shall we say? I don't want to spoil it too much for you because I would like people to watch it. There's some particular element to her character which will have for the fact that they're in the wilderness, will have a major bearing on what happens to her and the rest of the girls. And I didn't really fully expect they would pay that off by the end of the series. I mean, that's probably something you could have waited to the next series to get to.
Yeah.
But this is one of the elements they've kind of said, oh, we don't really know what's going to happen about that yet. We've got about 10 different ideas we're playing around with for what might happen with that particular character and their condition. And you're like, look, I guess, as you sort of said, as you sort of write it, you're sort of saying you evolve, you learn more about them, and you kind of go, you get new ideas about what they might do in a particular situation. But like, I would have thought the major beats should be in place.
Yeah, I don't understand from a producer level of it. Just looking at it, and going, okay, yeah. So pitch me your story. Okay, this is it. So like, all right, cool. You haven't told me the end though. So like, oh yeah, but you can give us money. It's great. We'll work it out by the time we get there. I wouldn't invest in that. I was like, okay, cool. I don't understand this notion of like Lost. They said that they always had this plan and it was going to be seven series. Like prime example of good quality story writing, whether you actually like its execution or anything. Babylon 5. J. Michael Straczynski, he wrote that with exits and re-entrances for all of the characters in the event that there were going to be contract problems or deaths or anything like that. He had these exit plans and re-entry plans, and he always had this idea of where it was going to end up. He didn't know entirely how long he was going to have to tell that story, and he did have to truncate and edit a lot of it for the final season. But he still basically got where he needed to go, and the characters still had their developments. That makes sense to me because from a studio perspective, it's like, okay, we know where this is going to end. You get season 3 and its numbers are dropping off. It's like, okay, we need you to wrap this up in 2 seasons rather than 7, which you had hoped for. Get to it. Versus, all right, Lost, fantastic first season. You've posed all these questions. Where does it go next? It's like, we're not going to tell you. It's going to be a surprise for you as it is for the audience and us.
I feel like this is how we end up with Losts.
Yes.
These people making shit up on the fly, or they have the basic outline of a story, and they say, we'll color in the details when we get to it. We'll figure it out. I think of Nick Frost's character when he's in Shaun of the Dead, and he's like, do you want to practice being a zombie? I'll do it on the night. Yeah, it's like, I'll just figure it out when we get to writing that episode. And you're like, and then it's probably, I think they do it myself because they don't know and they haven't got a good idea yet. And they just want to make the show because they've got the rest of the thing in place. Now, I'm not saying Yellow Jackets will be like that. I mean, I've kind of really, I think I said last week, I want to hope it doesn't go the Lost route and become something like that. It's so far, it hasn't really. I was just disappointed. And that last episode kind of reeked of, well, yeah, just all set up for the next one. And maybe we don't know how this thing ends yet. So we'll just kick the can down the road into season 2, which then, I mean, puts the pressure on them. You got to get it right now. You're going to do another season.
Yeah.
So what they're getting right for me, though, is everything that happens in the wilderness could be plausible.
Mm.
It is grounded. It could legitimately be just what it looks like, It could be there are sensible, magical explanations for pretty much everything that's happened.
Mm.
At the same time, they are bloody mysterious.
Mm-hmm.
And they may not be. They may actually be a supernatural element at play in all of this. We don't know. And that's a nice place to spark to. It's a nice place to park your story in that sort of that valley of unsurety between, am I watching the X-Files? Because remember when the X-Files started, it was a bit like, oh, well, are there aliens or are they monsters and stuff? We don't know. If you have good episodes in the first few seasons, you're like, well, I don't know. You just sort of just Chris Carter going, you make up your mind. This could be anything. It could be aliens. It could not be aliens. When that show really started to go down, they just completely jumped the shark and went, yeah, there are aliens, and it's a giant conspiracy to breed aliens with humans or whatever the fuck was going on.
What the actual end result was.
So, did anyone make it to the end of that series? I don't know, but I think that's when it was at its best, and I think this show's parking itself in that very familiar space of going, it looks mysterious, but if we get to the end and we say, actually, there was no monsters, there was no ghosts, it was just a bunch of fucked up kids stuck in the wilderness, and lots of shit went wrong. You go back and watch it all again. You go, well, actually, that's legit. Could happen.
Yeah.
I like that because I don't like, my thoughts on fantasy. If it's sometimes a basic ghost story, it becomes I just pull out all the tropes. I'm enjoying that of the last episode notably as well. Very interesting director of the last episode, a name we should probably be familiar with, and that's Eduardo Sanchez.
Oh,
he of course directed the horror classic The Blair Witch Project in 1999. So the man changed the face of horror films forever.
Yes.
And he, in the last episode, is apart from that lack of payoff, it's all working together really well. So that valley of well, is this real? Is this magic, or is it what's going on? Is nice. The mysteries are setting up is cool, and that ensemble cast of actors who are just doing their best work. And you see people like Christina Ricci, who's been famous for a long time, but you don't see her in a lot of cinema anymore. I hope this really kicks her career into another gear because she is playing a character that's a little bit against type for her, and she's wonderful. And I also give out shout out to Juliette Lewis because I'm like, does she ever get sick of playing like strung out, like burnt out, like drug addict characters? Like that's all she ever seems to play.
Maybe in real life she's just like the chillest, nicest person. She's like, you know what? I need somewhere to just feel safe to break bad.
Pretty much. I wouldn't put it past her. I mean, I just don't think you don't see her a lot. I haven't seen her in anything new for a very, very, very long time. I'm just looking for a IMDb page here. I haven't seen Gem and the Holograms. Maybe I saw that. I don't remember. No, I can't remember Whip It was the last thing I reckon I saw with her in it. And that was 2009.
Yeah, that was a while ago.
She's done other stuff. I just haven't actually seen much of it. So it's kind of cool to see her popping up in something, even if it's playing a stereotypically Juliette Lewis kind of character. At least she does it really well.
Yeah, she sells it well.
So despite my negative comments about that payoff at the end, as I said, I seem to be the odd one out. Most people seem to dig it. So if you got Paramount Plus, are you the one who has Paramount Plus? Because who else has it? Like, who's paying for this? Then this is. I would put this at the top of my to watch list when the kids have gone to bed. It is available via Amazon Prime, but again, you have to pay for a Paramount Plus membership. In fact, I would probably just say take the 3-week and just binge it. Then don't renew it because there's nothing else.
Not really, yeah. All right. I'm just going to quickly finish off, if I may, with my very brief thoughts on Monster Hunter because why not? Why not? Why the fuck
I
not?
tried to watch this last year, and I made it about half an hour in.
Yeah, I had to watch it in 3 sittings. I did not like it at any point. It tries to be. There's an element of the storytelling that would have been really cool if they had fully invested in it, where Mila Jovovich's character, Artemis, and her platoon mysteriously get teleported to this unknown desert sea and are immediately accosted by this ridiculously oversized, giant, humongous monster and are basically entirely wiped out except for her. She manages to survive. She comes across the resident of this land, just referred to as Hunter, played by Tony Jaa, who sprung to fame with his Muay Thai skills in Ong Bak a few years ago. But they try to kind of put an element of 127 hours into this, which would have been really fucking cool if they had to put this multi-dimensional, someone coming from Earth going to this other environment, then sure, have her just randomly drop in. But it spent far too much time building up this faux camaraderie with all of her platoon members that go by such names as Lincoln, Marshall, Dash, Steeler, and Axe. They are literally taken from the Michael Bay Book of Naming. Don't care. None of them fucking survive except Artemis. Spoilers, I guess, but who fucking cares? You're not watching this for the soldiers. You're watching this for the monsters. It's called Monster Hunter, and it's a typical movie where they went, oh yeah, very popular franchise. Let's turn it into a movie and change basically everything about it. If they had just gone, okay, this is Artemis learning to survive, cool. And there's elements where it's like, all right, that's fine. The monsters look fine. The acting between Mila Jovovich and Tony Jaa is bad. Mila Jovovich has had her moment where she could have been a strong female leading actress with possibility, and she is now very, very happy and taking a paycheck and still fighting, but not. She doesn't sell a punch like she used to, and it just looks a bit tired, which is fair. You know, she's getting older, and why not? But maybe don't sign up to do your husband's movies because he makes schlock. Tony Jaa, not an actor, and instead of letting him do actual fighting, which he is trained at and is good at, it's like, oh no, we're going to give you these oversized bow and arrow because that's what's in the movie. It's like, okay, you're making references here and here to the source material, but you're throwing everything else out, and it ends up looking like a weird Super Mario movie, but somehow more offensive. And Ron Perlman turns up in it as the Admiral, and mysteriously, just because they get to a point where it's like, oh fuck, we need to explain shit of this world, but everyone speaks a different language than Mila Jovovich doesn't understand. Ah, yes, he found someone who also fell through the portal and studied English. How convenient. Fantastic. Oh, he's gone. All right. And then it's like, yes, we're going to attack this tower. It's like, oh, wow, that suddenly came about. And then it more or less ends after a climactic, boring fight. And yeah, don't watch this.
I watched, like I said, half an hour, and I was painfully bored. It was just, you're right. Paul W.S. Anderson is a terrible writer. He is a terrible director. His next film is based on a George R.R. Martin story, of all things, believe it or not. Okay. And it's going to have Dave Bautista in it, which is interesting. Dave slumming it. The only decent thing he's ever done, I would say, is probably Event Horizon.
Great.
I did like the first Resident Evil film, okay, but it probably was just not that great anyway. But I mean, it was okay. Event Horizon, that was good though. Not to, but any original Mortal Kombat, but he's terrible. This is a fucking awful movie. Yeah. And he's kind of like, I know I've been on the bandwagon for the last 8 years that video game films will become what comic book films are today.
If they're consistently given to him.
But I don't understand why they adapt the wrong films, like
Yeah.
the wrong games. Like I think I've seen. I've never played Monster Hunter, but I've seen what it's about. It never struck me as a game with a particularly strong storyline that would stand up to being adapted into a film. It's like when they make Mortal Kombat films. It's a popular game, but it never really screened out for a film.
No.
But maybe we'll get there. We've got, I think, that Tom Holland one coming out later this year.
No, that I can smell the shit on that already, my friend.
Uncharted, that's the one, yeah.
Yeah, that I can smell a million miles away, and I really don't want to go and watch the movies, but I have to put my money where my mouth is and say that I watch these things so other people don't have to.
Or maybe it'll be The Last of Us. I think that film's happening.
That's a TV show.
TV show now. Okay. Yeah.
And that's being given, like, apparently it's got the most expensive per episode budget of TV. So they're putting a lot of effort into this one. One of the big whiffy parts of Uncharted for me is big old Marky Mark.
He has his moments.
Yeah, but he hasn't had a moment for a while. And he's playing the character of Sully, which he's not Mark Wahlberg. He's just not. It's like going, oh, yeah, you know who would be a fantastic person to portray Gandalf? Justin Bieber.
Okay.
It's just wrong.
Haven't played it, so I did play. Sorry, no, I haven't played Uncharted at all, so I can't comment on that. Maybe it'll be Borderlands. What an odd little cast that is. Kate Blanchett and Jack Black and
directed by Eli Roth.
Okay. Weird. Super. Yeah. Maybe that'll be the one. I don't know. It hasn't really happened yet because we only had those weird kiddie films like Sonic and Pokemon that have Angry Birds that have kind of really made money, but you need a serious moneymaker to kind of hit that. If one of them hits that Marvel money, one of them lands in that space, and maybe we'll start talking about them being the thing. But Monster Hunter is not it.
No. And I will spend no more time talking about it. And that is a good place to end.
And because we have gone longer again for over 2 hours for a short show.
Yes, we know how to talk, and we also don't really know how to stop. But thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us this week. Just to sum up the show, we talked about our chain movie of the week, Explorers. The next link in the chain is going to be My Own Private Idaho, picked by the talent himself, Travis Croft. We talked about the latest, the near latest episode of Peacemaker, still in love with that. We had our sponsor of Rollerblade Warriors in Russian. We talked about The Merger, the Aussie movie. We talked about Guy Ritchie's latest Wrath of Man. Travis finished up season 1 of Yellow Jacket, and I just lit a fire under Monster Hunter.
And he deserves it.
Yes. So we've got My Own Private Idaho next week. We'll probably be talking more Peacemaker. We'll probably talk a little bit of Boba Fett if we both get round to it. I've got a couple of other things that I'm hoping that I'll be able to talk about. The big one for me next week, I will talk about The Legend of Vox Machina. I'm not talking about it now because I don't want to spoil it for anyone. And I want Travis to be able to at least watch one episode. And that comes out this Friday.
On Amazon.
Amazon, yes. So that is all I have to say on that.
Well, and that I should say good night to everyone.
Good night and see you next week. Good night.